Monsieur le
Secretary General of the United Nations, ladies and gentlemen, heads of state and government, dear representatives of youth, students, educational communities, dear friends. It is a particularly symbolic moment to find ourselves here at the United Nations, despite the disasters happening in the world, here as we are to defend the universal right to education. I'm proud to see amongst us many representatives of the educational community, and we need to hear their voice, we need their experience. And I'm also so happy to see so many young people here being given such prominence at this summit. Thanks to your participation, all your participation, this global common good, which is education, is finally being accorded the position which it deserves. Namely, it is being placed at the top of the international agenda, and I would like to thank the Secretary General of the United Nations. We should recognize the extraordinary power of education, but power which is nevertheless often underappreciated and underfinanced. Education, which, whenever we have placed our faith in it, in teachers, in schools, has changed the lives of individuals, of nations, and of entire generations. There can be no economic development and no peace without education. And it is at the heart of the mandate of UNESCO for 75 years, since our first major literacy campaigns in the south of Italy and in South Korea. Our organization has relentlessly accompanied its member states to ensure that this fundamental right is effective and genuine. Whereas 400 million children were deprived of schools in the year 2000, 20 years later, that figure has decreased by 40%. There is progress, therefore, but it is still not enough, because a 40% reduction still means 244 million children that will not be going to school this year. And, of course, here I would like to take up the appeal just now issued by the Secretary General, and that is of the United Nations, and our call for Afghan girls, all of them, of all ages, be able to go back to school. It is their right. But another aspect of this educational crisis is the fact that a lot of children that are in school, even though there are more of them, are not learning properly. And this situation has been worsened since the educational disaster that was the COVID-19 pandemic. The figures that we published last July, together with UNICEF and the World Bank, show that although 57% of children of 10 years could not understand a simple written text before the pandemic, that figure has now gone up to 70%, and in sub-Saharan Africa, it's 89%. It is urgent, therefore, that collectively we reverse this trend. With regard to its content, education cannot either be rigid or inadequate for the needs of the 21st century. What is at stake in this transformation of education is fundamentally linked to the content of learning. Education, if it is to be relevant, must be adapted to our world, to our century, in order to train the citizens of today, but above all, the citizens of tomorrow. This has been UNESCO's guiding thought since 2018. We took this up in 2018 together with you all, and we've put this into our report on the future of education, drawn up under the leadership of Madam Salework Zewde, the President of the Federal Republic of Ethiopia, and I thank her for this work. This is the document, as you know, which is a reference document for this summit, the future of education. It calls upon us to place education at the heart of our plans for society, at the heart of the social contract that we are to forge, it calls upon us to overcome the risk of stagnation by placing education at the heart of this new social contract, adapted to the great challenges of our time. And I'd like to quote here 3 of them. Our report as a living reality on the planet, the digital transformation, and finally peace. 3 central topics for an education in our times and also for tomorrow.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the first of these themes, our relationship with nature and the need to find new responses to address climate disruption. For this, education has a key role to play. Yet, less than half of all countries truly address environmental issues in their school curricula. Our commitment at UNESCO is to support our member states so that all are able to give climate education a central place by 2025. This means for us accompanying our member states through this transition, because it's also a transition in education, by offering concrete assistance to transform school curricula, to train teachers, to make educational institutions models for the rest of society to follow. Second, the challenge of the digital era. Because right now, this major technological and anthropological turning point is neither regulated nor controlled. But the digital world is not an obvious world. It's not that intuitive. We must therefore make it truly accessible to all ages through open educational resources, so digital gaps do not widen inequalities between generations and between countries. We must also teach users to master this digital world and to approach it with a critical mind, which is what we've been missing in the recent years. UNESCO is committed to this through the development of digital skills and media and information literacy. Third and lastly, and this is the essence of UNESCO's mandate, education must always foster peace. It must support understanding and respect of diversity, respect of others in diverse and interconnected societies. To this end, our member states in Paris have made an essential decision. They have decided to reshape international doctrine on this subject. And we've started a global conversation to reform UNESCO's recommendation on education for peace and human rights, to guide public policies in response to contemporary challenges, and to do so for the long term. Excellencies, in this interconnected world, education also requires international cooperation, and this is why we are here discussing education at the heart of the UN. Since last year, we have collectively reinforced the institutional framework that guides international cooperation on education, the High-Level Steering Committee on SDG 4, under the auspices of UNESCO in Paris. This committee will make it possible to better coordinate the efforts of education actions, in particular to monitor commitments, including the commitments made at this summit. Commitments that have been prepared through national consultation, supported by UNESCO in over 150 countries. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank the President of Sierra Leone, as co-chair of this committee, for his unwavering dedication to this cause. And of course, we will also need more adequate funding, more material, more financial and human resources. Last November, UNESCO convened the Global Education Meeting, where our member states adopted the Paris Declaration. In doing so, they committed to setting aside at least 15% of public spending, or 4% of GDP, for education, compared to 3.6 points today in low-income countries. This engagement is indispensable, as we know that education is not a cost, but the best investment. There is no fairer and more effective investment than education, than investing in teachers, in schools, than training and recruiting teachers, to train them better, to consider them better. And this is also what we all realized during the pandemic. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to transform education itself if we want to transform the world. The message that was brought here ahead of this summit by the young generation is very clear. We need to transform education so that they can have the future they want. I thank you very much.